We have a dollar liquidity crisis that's brewing.
World War III is economic and psychological.
What Trump is doing is he is now setting the stage for dollar dominance within a framework where Bitcoin will be a collateral asset, gold will be a collateral asset.
Trump has won the Civil War. There is no MAGA Civil War anymore. That's completely fake.
Trump can bomb Iran, declare victory, and go home tomorrow. He doesn't care. The reason that we're there is to rewire global trade away from geographic choke points. We're going to move into that world of ARC, what I've been saying for 2 years now, which is America, Russia, China.
Because COVID showed us there's only really two industries that matter in the world, Wall Street and the energy industry. They're the only two industries that matter. And Bitcoin is going to infect those industries.
Super fast team, if you want to help the podcast continue, share it with one person who you think will enjoy it. All right, so for today, we have the geopolitical mastermind behind the Gold, Goats, and Guns newsletter, Tom Luongo, returning, and top Bitcoin strategist, Nolan Bauerle. Now, I warn you, these two do not pull their punches. We cover the brutal truth about Bitcoin's role in the new emerging monetary system, the death of the Uniparty, and we start the conversation by analyzing the Iran conflict and Trump's empire-ending moves to rewire global trade. All right, Tom, Nolan, thank you so much for joining me today. Very excited to have this conversation. We've got a lot of ground to cover. So commodity markets, Bitcoin, the stablecoin story, and of course, all the geopolitical chess moves going on right now. But I wanted to start with the recent news that the U.S. House just passed the war resolution directing Trump to terminate the military involvement against Iran. It still has to clear the Senate, but it feels like a political signpost. So Tom, beginning with you, what's your 30,000-foot view of the Iran conflict right now? Where are we? What's left to accomplish in the region? And how does the House vote change your calculus, if at all?
It doesn't change my calculus at all because it doesn't matter what they do because Trump has to veto it and then they have to go back and get 2/3 or 60. They got to get 60 votes. So it doesn't matter. It's all just virtue signaling on the part of a recalcitrant legislature in the United States who's clearly in full-blown opposition mode, which is why Trump then moved Bill Pulte in as ODNI, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes, because he's part of the. It's like everything else. It sound like I'm gish galloping around, but I'm really not. Everything is connected, and because it's how you put pressure on people ultimately is you have to when you have oppositional powers in the domestic politics space, then you have to break that logjam so that you can then open something else up in the geopolitical space. So you've got a logjam in quote unquote negotiations over the Iran situation. Trump can bomb Iran, declare victory, and go home tomorrow. He doesn't care. So what he's doing is he's playing this game of, again, as always with Trump, he's always trying to get 3, 4, 5 wins out of the same thing. And it drives people nuts. And it sounds like 4D chess or whatever the hell you want to call it. But it's just reality, which is that he's got a different and deeper strategy that's in play than what's, clearly being pushed at you as the reason we're there. The reason that we're there is to rewire global trade away from geographic choke points, be they geographic or production choke points. So Taiwan, TSMC is being replicated around the world, right? That's why we bought a stake in Intel. That's why, Phoenix is going to be turned into, hot dry Taiwan, blah, 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 blah. And then the Straits of Hormuz, look, the whole British-French game in the Middle East for years has been to keep everybody at each other's throats and keep all of the land itself at war. Lebanon, Syria, Israel, Jordan, all of it. Why? Because that way you can't run pipelines north out of the Arabian Peninsula into Haifa and out and use the port at Haifa to get around the Strait of Hormuz. So everything that the British and the French, by the way, who were also very much a part of the IRGC story from a money perspective, from an old relationship perspective, has been to push global trade and global oil flow into the Strait of Hormuz to make it more powerful than it should be. When the normal reaction to everybody would be like, well, we don't want to deal with these freaking crazy people. So why don't we develop Alaska? Why don't we develop Louisiana? Why don't we develop Kamchatka Peninsula? Why don't we develop these things? And of course, the whole geopolitical game board has been about forcing everybody back into the straits, because that was the gambit. And the gambit was really simple. Give Iran a bunch of money, Obama, a bunch of money and a bunch of uranium and a bunch of centrifuges and a bunch of this and a bunch of that, and let them build friggin' 1 billion ballistic missiles, point them all at the other Gulf states, and then build a nuclear weapon, create hermit kingdom of death cultist Shia and declare martial law over the world. That was their plan, and then decamp the city of London to Dubai. Done. Like it's not that difficult. That's the way the British operate, and so now we're watching Trump blow that up. So he doesn't care, because every day that this goes on, the world reroutes and rewires global oil flow and global trade away from Hormuz. And every day, we watch the divisions within the Iranian political structure deepen. Okay, Pezeshkian, the Iranian president, resigned the other day after allowing us a glimpse into what's going on in Iran by opening up some of the internet traffic, and obviously we getting enough Starlink satellites into Iran and up and running that we can now figure out what's going on, and we can see that they're running out of food. They're running out of basic stuff. They're literally now at the point of they've already slaughtered all the animals, and now they don't have any grain, and now they don't have any meat. If you don't have any, you didn't have any grain to feed the animals, so you slaughtered the animals. It's the same thing that cattle herdsmen did here in the United States during COVID. Okay, when we couldn't move anything around, they started slaughtering cattle herds. Heifers, and because they couldn't maintain anything, we couldn't move grain and anything else. We all went through this, and we're still paying for it today. So the microcosm of the $9 a pound ground beef in certain parts of the United States, or whatever the hell it is it's the same thing that's going on in Iran, except that Iran is going on 100 times worse. And within weeks, we're going to be dealing with a population that's like, that's enough.
And you hit it on the head in the sense that it is, everything is flowing through this Middle East theater, right? Everything is connected: China, Europe, the banks, the sanction regimes. But even domestically in America, this was political because, of course, Trump is prosecuting, pretty much finishing the war that he began. His original conflict in the entire Trump MAGA movement began in 2015 when he attacked the Uniparty within the Republican Party. And this weekend, the reason why this war measures thing is going on is because he showed that he will not have to play ball with them anymore. He went into Texas and took Cornyn's seat away, gave it to Paxton. And this is those Thune and all these guys that won't give him an appointment, right? This has never happened before in the history of America, where a party runs ostensibly, apparently Trump runs both Congress and the Senate, but he can't get one single appointment. That's why Bill Pulte has to be acting director. He will not pass an appointment. They're already moving to get him stricken from the administration as it is. So you're seeing this system, you're seeing the Uniparty. This is the oldest of Trump's wars. This goes back to why is he a hero? I don't like people who are captured, and the way the Republicans lit themselves on fire back in 2015. So you can't say that about a war hero. You can't call Jeb Bush low energy. That's not nice. He's a Bush. So it goes back, and it's what I always said, even when Trump left us in 2021, and I left the Trump camp on the last day of the Trump administration because no pardons for Ross, no pardons for Assange. That was too much for me personally. I wanted to see what else was in the market. But I said, you'll never get me to not love Trump for what he did to the Republican Party. That was the greatest gift we could have received. Him exposing that the Republican Party and the Uniparty existed, that red and blue were fake, that there was no Democrat, Republican. It's as fake as the fights are in the Middle East. It's designed as a fake prison of two ideas, a fake binary that gets people stuck within this blue-red dichotomy that isn't real. It's not real. You have more options than red and blue. You don't have only those two options. And that is what's tilting right now with the political scene in America. And in fact, Trump has won the Civil War. There is no MAGA Civil War anymore. That's completely fake. It's a bit of what we were talking about before on camera, a little bit of Russian money coming into the podcast world. They couldn't stop any of this. The real fight is that the Democrats have a civil war going on right now, and the deep state faction that Obama ran is losing. It's getting its ass kicked by the Mamdanis and the communists. We're seeing the actual red and blue shift now in America domestically into something that Bitcoiners will recognize. It's something more like communism versus decentralization and sovereignty, and the exact plane of battle that we want to be on, not fake right, left. Are you nice? Or what does your tweet mean or not? All this fake stuff.
Your thoughts?
Look, yeah, no, we'll get to Bitcoin in a minute. And the Bitcoiners, they've got y'all have I say this as both part of the Bitcoin movement and standing slightly outside of it. So I'm going to take I'm going to put the right foot that's outside the Bitcoin community, and I'm going to stand on that one for a minute and say, look, you guys have to realize that Bitcoin has become it's not what we originally, as decentralizers, as libertarians, or whatever we want to call ourselves. It ain't that anymore, and it hasn't been that for a little while, and it still has the ability to enforce private property, but it's going to be within a dollar framework. Okay. And I've been saying this for a long time, and I get a lot of shit from Bitcoiners about it. But read the room and understand that that's where it is. So let's now get past the first grade ideological fights of, oh my God, we're the goodies because we believe we're against government and against fiat money and all this blah, blah, blah. We're like, let's get beyond that. We're now leveling up into a world where the monetary system is changing. The way we fund the government is changing. Everything is changing. And Bitcoin has a very, very important role to play in that. And again, certain Bitcoiners get this, and I appreciate that they get it, and they see it as a step. And I also get that they see it as a step towards eventual Bitcoin dominance. Yeah, maybe. Okay. The jury is out on that until we get there. And if it happens before I die and, Bitcoin wins, I'll be like, oh yeah, I was wrong. And I'll have no problem saying that. But until we get there, there are many, 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 many steps along the way unless we get there. Let's make it abundantly obvious. Okay. All that's to say the following. What Trump is doing in a geopolitical sense and in a domestic policy sense is he is now setting the stage for dollar dominance within a framework where Bitcoin will be a collateral asset, gold will be a collateral asset, silver may or may not. Vince Lanci and I slightly disagree on these things as well. Again, the silver bugs will tell me that I'm a bad person for not wanting to include silver into all this. The bigger issue is that we're not here to stand on our ideological fifis anymore. This is about winning real, honest to God, political battles where there are real guns being pointed at us all the time. And we're not in a situation where we can just sit back, stack sats and win. That's not going to work. That's no different than argue over semicolons, have ideological purity, run a tranny under the Be Ungovernable banner, or the Libertarian Party. What? You guys can't get arrested as dog catcher, and he's running for dog catcher in East Texas, and you're going to tell me that you're going to put Thomas Massey in the White House? Okay, you guys are delusional, and you frighten me terribly, and I'd like to go now. Okay, so let's get down to the brass tacks of practical politics, which is where Trump operates. He has a vision. That vision includes Bitcoin. It is not exclusive to Bitcoin. He understands that it's going to be part of the way he gets out of this old system of debt and taxes and thievery and flow control and all of this stuff. He wants to control the flows. He wants the America to control the flow, and he wants Bitcoin to collateralize the new flow system. Whereas what does the European Union want? What does the City of London want? What do they want? They want, of course, to continue the old system where we constantly have to rent our life back from them at pennies on the dollar. That's their model. We're trying to change that model. Bitcoin is part of the conversation where we get out of that model, but it's not the only thing that gets us there. And I really do believe that at a certain level, this is why I've been so angry with Bitcoin maxis for a long time, that you guys are actually carrying water for the bad guys by being, hey, step A, step Z. You sound just as crazy as freaking libertarians saying, all we got to do is enforce private property and the world will become a great place. And no one believes it, which is why nobody votes for them, which is why Thomas Massey lost his freaking primary. If you look at Massey's primary numbers, they were very obvious. In a world of 22% voter turnout on primary day, right? Thomas Massey's numbers year over year were falling from 50,000 to 47,000 to 39,000 votes. In this one, he got 47,000 votes, but he got 47,000 votes in a 34% voter turnout environment. Now, in the most expensive House race of all time. Okay, so he was able to up his vote totals, but he still wasn't able to up his vote totals back to 2020 levels or 2022
But it was
levels.
the Jews. Come on.
Oh yeah, but the Jews were on both sides. But the Jews were on both sides of the
They didn't want to hear about John Cornyn, their biggest recipient, losing, getting his ass kicked either. They didn't want to hear about that.
They didn't want to hear that. They didn't want to hear him going after, forcing Tillis out of the Senate in North Carolina, or Bill Cassidy down in Louisiana. Trump got 3 senators. I want to remind everybody, if you don't think Donald Trump is not in charge of what's going on politically, we haven't seen a president use the bully pulpit of the presidency to get 3 senators since FDR.
We had 101 out of 101 House seats, 8 on 8 of endorsements for governors, and 9 on 9 with senators. Perfect run throughout.
Yeah, and Supreme Court justice and state Supreme Court justices, state House reps, state senators, blah blah blah. Like, the guy's got 110 to nothing. Okay, like it's ridiculous. And Massey left his constituencies behind. Okay, he did. He left them behind, and that's why he lost. Like, no one was going to, no one in East, and again, America you got to realize that America is a big place. Europeans are beginning to figure this out, by the way, that there's like 15 or 20 subcultures within America. I don't know if you guys, I've been watching this recently. There's a whole subculture on YouTube. Europeans come to America and are surprised right? Yeah. There's a whole subculture in this. And I think it's really important that even Americans watch this stuff, because then they begin to realize, oh my God, America's not just the cosmotarians in DC and New York in New York and California. America and everybody else is just above mouth breathing moron. Like, got news for you, folks. Those mouth breathing morons in the middle of the country are the ones that are your people.
Not long after 9/11, I remember I had a similar framework of, Europe's better at stuff. And I was on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, and I saw a Trans Am, like a classic mint 1970s Trans Am roll up the Champs-Élysées. And it was one of the first times in my life where I really was like, wait a minute. I never really appreciated that car. I thought Lamborghinis or Porsches were better or something. But when I heard that V8 rolling up the Champs-Élysées, something deep inside of me was like, yeah, fuck America, man. Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I had the chance to finally buy my, what you would call my midlife crisis car, and it really wasn't. I've always liked cars that, I've always liked, performance cars, but I finally had a chance to buy one. What did I buy? I bought a yellow Mustang convertible with a 6-speed manual. Why? Because Ford makes a great 6-speed manual. And did I buy the V8? No, I didn't buy the V8. I bought the turbocharged 4. But it was a great touring car. It was a cool car, and I enjoyed it. And and I'll be honest with you, I'd probably still own it if I didn't live in on a pockmarked dirt road in North Florida, and the car was literally shaking itself apart. I had to get rid of it.
Well, what you're saying about Bitcoin, though, the blind spot I think that Bitcoiners have had for a long time, and it's something that I have been touching on my show every day, is that Bitcoiners seem to imagine that you can go from the US dollar system straight to Bitcoinization. But the truth is, the Federal Reserve did not just come out of a gold standard. It came out of bimetallism. We had a different system before the Federal Reserve. And I think in many ways, we're running this thing backwards. In order to unwind the dollar, we're going back to where we came from. That is bimetallism. That is a world where the US dollar, after the end of World War II, what I saw was everyone was allowed their own fiat Ponzi. And it all plugged into the Federal Reserve System. What Trump is basically saying is all of your fiat Ponzis are getting shut down. They're going to weaponize the US dollar. They're going to dollarize Japan. They're going to dollarize Canada, Venezuela, Argentina, Mexico, whoever wants it. Whoever can't handle their own inflation,
And,
US dollar.
both through the private markets, Tether, and the
Yeah.
American banking system,
Yes.
Clarity Act, Genius Act,
All of it. All of it is designed. And that's why I don't care when people say, oh, the bankers are going to win the Clarity Act thing because they're going to stop Americans from getting yield. That's actually a win for us, okay? Because who cares if Americans aren't getting yield? Foreigners can get yield. And Americans are going to subsidize the weaponization of dollar demand around the world. So once you see Warsh lower those interest rates from the Federal Reserve, Canada's going to have to follow. You're going to have to see the Bank of Canada drop to 2% if America's at 1%. But then what ends up happening is the private market, basically the old Hong Kong dollar, the original version of the stablecoin, because it's collateralized seigniorage. Seigniorage is the best business that ever existed, and the banks have had it for themselves until this time. This is going to be collateralized private seigniorage again, which has tons of spread, tons of money to be made. And all they're going to have to do at Coinbase is say 10% on USD deposits in Canada. All of the American base can now subsidize that. And that's what's going to happen. If JP Morgan gets his way, if Jamie Dimon gets his way, he's going to create the dollarization of the rest of the world. Who cares what's going on in America? Canadians are going to get 10% on Canadian dollar deposits and 2% on US dollar deposits. That's the end of that. So when, putting all this together of what bimetallism looks like, what it looks like when you've got political money functioning the way it was always designed, they're going to get what they asked for. They want it to be fiat political money. You're going to get it. Your dollar is becoming food stamps. It's going to become consumption money. It's going to be what the peso is in Argentina today. They use the peso to buy coffee and Coca-Cola and consume. You buy things with it. It's political money. It's not. But that's the difference. This is what the Bitcoiners who believe that we'd go straight to the Bitcoin standard if all the plebs of the world held some Bitcoin and we didn't participate, we would win. That's not true, because COVID showed us there's only really 2 industries that matter in the world. I love the restaurant business, but it doesn't really matter. Nope. I love this industry, the fake laptop jobs. None of it matters. The 2 industries that matter in the fiat world are Wall Street and the energy industry. They're the only 2 industries that matter. And Bitcoin is going to infect those industries. You win those industries, you win the SpaceX IPO and you're included in it. You go get all these energy companies to start keeping Bitcoin on the balance sheet because they're also Bitcoin miners because they have stranded energy and all these things. That's what sets the stage for Bitcoin winning the industries that matter. And if you get that, you shift reality. And I've been saying since COVID, I don't think this a bunch of plebs holding Bitcoin is actually going to happen. I saw how sludge people function during COVID, even the Bitcoiners. And from there, I said, all right, if that's the deal, then we've got to just be like a virus in the industries that matter in the world, the industries that actually make the world go around. We have to infect them so that they want Bitcoin. And that's what's happening. Wall Street is obsessed with Bitcoin. And the volatility is no big deal to them. They've got the bug. The energy industry is next. Once they get the bug in the energy industry, we're in a purely bimetallic world where Bitcoin is being used for savings and the dollar is being used to consume. And we're not far from it now.
No, and it's going to be, and gold is going to be part of that conversation, and to a lesser extent, silver is going to be a part of that conversation. And what we're moving towards, and this is, I think, the important part, is what I've been talking about for a long time, which is that we're going to move to a deleveraged world where these consumption dollars are still going to be backed by something that is not leveraged. Okay, we're not talking about the T-bill market being rehypothecated through City of London 100 times into the eurodollar markets, where there's no control over the value, the monetary system, where the offshore dollar markets have the ability to dictate back to the dollar system what the price of a dollar is going to be. The goal of the goal of London under the LIBOR standard from 84 to 2008, or really to 2022, was to get the emission of US dollars down to zero, the cost of emission of new dollars down to zero, so that they could pull the yield off of their eurodollar deposits. And they're the ones who can then determine what the price of that dollar is, who gets them, who doesn't get them, direct the flow of them. And by also having control over the flow of oil, and which is the mechanism by which all of this dollar flow actually is collateralized and moves, because without it, there's no global trade. Without global trade, there's no Forex demand. Without Forex demand, there's no demand for money, blah, 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 blah. And then you use between that and the Bank of Japan being your, and to a lesser extent, the Swiss National Bank being at the zero bound. This is the means by which you create carry trades, which then they can profit off the spread, use the spread to then, buy political power around the world and do whatever they needed to do. What the stablecoin system will do is lower the leverage ratio. And it will also, and I really do believe, you listen to Warsh carefully, it's very clear what he's going to do and what Besant wants to do. And now they're talking about collapsing the 12 regional banks in the Federal Reserve and redesigning the Federal Reserve away from a railroad-based economy of the 19 teens to we don't need 12 reserve banks. I said this the moment I saw SOFR. I'm like, we don't need a Fed funds rate anymore. We don't need 12 regional Fed banks anymore. We don't need
the body language reading anymore and the press conferences and forward guidance. And
what all we need is the Federal Reserve to act as a monetary Exim bank for dollars. That's all it is. Whereas the domestic markets are going to use domestic stablecoins to fund domestic production at subsidized rates, similar to what China has been doing for years, and the offshore dollar rates will be higher. Notice how there's like a 3.5% spread between the offshore dollar rates of buying Chinese yuan debt and what Chinese entrepreneurs can lend at. Luke Roman talks about this all the time, but Luke, I in my opinion, gets it backwards. That this is not going to fuel that. This worked for China to build out the build them out, but it's going to come back and bite them in the ass once the United States pulls back on dollar creation or pulls back on dollar leverage, and we're going to shift that. We're going to shift that arbitrage to the United States, and Americans are going to get dollars at 1-2%. The rest of the world is going to get dollars at 3-4-5%. Other people are, yes, and there are going to be people who are going to be able to pull a higher yield off of Canadian dollar savings and whatnot, pumping into the system that way. That's fine, but what's really important is that at the same time, Trump is pulling all those dollars that went overseas over the last 50 years that are sitting on central bank balance sheets and sovereign wealth funds and everything else, and he's forcing them back into the United States as investment to accelerate the process of rebuilding the domestic productive base of the United States. And where we're not a financialized economy, we're an industrial economy on a percentage basis. That's important. And as far as the Clarity Act and the yield is concerned for Americans, they're not going to be able to get direct yield as a passbook savings passive yield off of the T-bill that backs those stable coins. That's what the banks are arguing for. But if you read the final language very carefully, they will be able to offer incentives for your savings. You will be able to time lock your stake, your stable coin savings. Now that gets us out of zero time money. That's important because that's what interest is supposed to fucking be, which is you lock your money up for a certain amount of time in order to forego the use of it to give it to somebody else to go do something with. The old system of paying on savings, okay, is with zero time. With zero time lockup is the friggin' fiat Ponzi system. Okay, you take that away and you say, okay, look, if you want that, you have to forego your money for a certain amount of time. And it's like 3 months, 6 months. Basically, all these stable coins are going to become the savings coin. The savings, the stable coin savings are going to look like CDs. Okay, that's what staking is.
When I first got into Bitcoin, I was overwhelmed. The jargon, the security risks, the fear that one mistake could cost everything. I remember staring at my screen and wondering, are my keys safe? Did I do this right? That experience is why I started BTC Sessions. For over a decade, this channel has helped millions of people like you learn how to use and secure Bitcoin. But I realized something. For many people, videos aren't enough. Everyone learns differently. Some need to ask questions in real time as an expert walks through their setup, their goals, and their threat model. And certain things like advanced cold storage, inheritance planning, privacy, and node or mining setups often can't be fully solved by watching another tutorial. So I built BTC Mentor. I recruited the best Bitcoin educators on the planet to work with you one-on-one. Real experts, real answers, personalized hands-on guidance tailored to your exact situation. Whether you're brand new or building a complex setup, we meet you where you're at and walk with you step by step. By the end, you don't just hope your Bitcoin is safe, you know it is. If you're ready for that level of confidence, then head to btcmentor.io and book a call with us today.
You forego your money for 7 months, and for 7 months CD, we'll give you 3%. We'll give you
We're already
4%,
seeing
whatever
this. We're already seeing the capital war that they're conducting right now, and that's why you do have a bit of demand destruction for dollars around the world, which is one of the reasons why Bitcoin has got the trouble right now. The IPO with SpaceX is a part of it. It's mopping up a lot of liquidity. A lot of money is going in that. People are trying to get money to go, but really Venezuela, Iran, all the financial sanctions. Yeah, the state of demand for money and it's less.
You're seeing it. You're seeing it in the SOFR markets. I did a podcast the other day with a friend of mine by the name of Matt Dines. I don't know if you know Matt.
Very well. Yeah. Well, I interviewed him. I don't know where. I interviewed him in Hong Kong last year.
Okay, cool. So Matt and I did 6 hours over 2 podcasts with Tommy Kerrigan going over a lot of this stuff. And Matt noted on Memorial Day how the whole friggin' 4-week T-bill market just like collapsed, right? As there was this massive demand for dollars while the U.S. markets were closed, and that's a huge tell. And then it's just been going on and on and on since then. I watched the volume on the SOFR futures market. I check it like in the December 26 and March 27 and June 27 money to see if there's any spikes in volume on certain days, because I know that in the past, like Andrew Bailey and Mark Carney have been running operations to attack SOFR in order to, they did this during the tariff tantrum. It was immense what they did during the tariff tantrum last year. I'm not seeing that right now. What I'm seeing is just generalized demand for dollars, and they're pushing up the bid on future money, because there's a real worry about dollars at this point, and then it's obvious in the 2-year yield as well, because there's a kink in the U.S. yield curve right at the 2-year mark. So,
well, Turkey would have been the extreme example of that, right? Because they basically just liquidated everything because they needed dollars now.
Yeah, well, City of London needed dollars now. They also needed gold. Like, don't kid yourself. Turkey is a City of London carve out. Turkey was just an offshore banking rate for them. When they start raiding BVI or the Caymans or Ireland, that's when it gets serious. Yeah. Canada, that's when it gets serious.
The biggest tell here was, if you remember when the Ukraine-Russia war started, and they had no trouble seizing all of Abramovich's yachts and his houses and everything. But when they find out with the Iranian thing, it was the big story was, what do we do? They have so much money here. They have a big real estate empire. Oh, it's such a complicated mess. The Russian guy was straightforward, simple. Take it. Get him out of here. Force him to sell his soccer team. They forced him to sell Chelsea. Yes. They couldn't. You can't seize someone's house. You can force someone to sell a sports team, but someone's got a $50 million house, and suddenly it's like, oh, what do? We can't figure this out. It's so complicated.
It was funny when we were up in Calgary, right? I was sitting there chatting with Matt that after Cornerstone that night, I was there with, it was me, Matt Dines, a couple other people, Cynthia Chung, Matt Ehret's wife. And we were talking about, and we got onto the subject of the IRGC and Iran and everything. Cynthia was asking, sincere, geopolitical questions. She was a good sport. We had a great conversation. Matt just termed the IRGC as a private equity fund that runs, it's a City of London private equity fund that operates inside Iran. There is no, that was his description of it. I'm like, oh my God, that's absolutely right. Because then when you go and you look at all the IRGC holding companies, where their money is and everything else, and then you realize that they were using the UAE as their banking center. They were their illicit money, their cash money, the cash that they get, not everything else. That all comes through Hezbollah, right? I was talking with my friend Halsey English in private the other day, and he's like, come on, dude, don't you understand that Hezbollah owns all the strip clubs in New Jersey? They own all the, that's where they make all their money. Like, Hezbollah owns a lot of this stuff, and the money just flows in. They're literally an organized crime syndicate around the world, funneling money through Hezbollah back to Iran and the IRGC. The IRGC then uses the money to pay for all the terrorism and everything else. Note, by the way, so just to bring it back full circle to Nathan's original question about where are we with Iran, how about this, folks? At the beginning of the war, the Duganistas, and which would be everybody in the orbit of Steve Bannon and all those people immediately said, claimed Bibi made Trump go to war on behalf of Israel. And then Iran, facilitated this narrative by immediately bombing the crap out of Israel. Now that ended once Iran had no missiles to fire anymore, right? Or didn't have any launchers left. They have plenty of missiles, don't have any launchers left, or they have some, right? After that, they immediately, every time the negotiations kept moving and things kept happening, the UAE leaves OPEC, then opens up the pipeline of Fujairah and blah, 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 blah. Notice how Iran wasn't screaming about Israel anymore. They were screaming about the UAE. They were bombing the UAE. Why? Because Bessent was using OFAC to shut down the money flow. The UAE flipped and gave up all the IRGC's bank accounts, froze them all, froze the money flow. And so Iran immediately, the IRGC immediately then starts attacking them. Same thing, by the way, last week when it looked like we were, somewhere close to some kind of a deal. And, we started turning on Hezbollah in Lebanon. And what happens? Hezbollah then attacks Israel. And it was Hezbollah first, which attacks Israel, and then the entire commentariat, including all of the MI6 carve-outs known as the British media, the Daily Mail, the Times, about all that stuff. They were all writing headlines blaming Israel for destroying the peace talks. Now, there's a piece of that, of course, because Netanyahu's response was, of course, over the top because he just wants to wipe these guys out. And so the situation with him and Trump is dicey. But the reality is that when the IRGC's money is really threatened and a conduit is threatened, they then attack, and then their cover, their what's the word I'm looking for? Their press arm, effectively, London, Paris, the European, the American intelligence services, part of the media, be the New York Times, the WAPO, those guys, Axios, and all the rest would all turn around and blame Israel for this when it was really Hezbollah doing it, because the IRGC was really, they're running out of money. And so Bessent has taken over for Trump as the guy telling you what the strategy is. And he's really big gay. I mean this sincerely. When I call him Big Gay Patton, I mean it, right? And it's hilarious.
He's an interesting character. Like, no matter what you think about him, I find him absolutely fascinating. Like the stories of him fighting apparently in the White House and the big pink house. And it's just, it's like, this dude is a fucking character. Like, I love it.
No, that was the other day. Who was at the Senate, the Senate hearing. Somebody said, "Is it true that you threatened to knock to punch Bill Pelting in the face?" He's like, "No, I threatened to kick his ass." No, actually, I told him I would kick his ass. Like, Bessent doesn't play, right? He's clearly the guy running the operation here, because this is about money. It's about money flow. It's about oil and everything.
Because my understanding is the Soros money is not so clear and cut. There's different factions around the Soros money, and there's Arabella, and Bessent's association with the Soros money isn't from the one who's married to Abedin, the inheritor of the social causes. I can't remember his name all of a sudden.
Right.
But it's
Wiener?
Alexander Soros. No, Huma Abedin is married to Alexander Soros.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Right. And obviously she's his beard because he's gay as a $3 bill.
Yeah. I've met him. He's a big, it's for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, but look, Bessent is like Trump. He's like a lot of these guys. Like, they were hot shots. They were bad men when they were younger. And I'm at the point, like, you get to a certain point and you're like, just because you were a bad man when you were 25 because you were a retard when you were 25, or you were at what you were when you were 20, doesn't mean you're that person at 65. Like, F. Scott Fitzgerald was wrong. The idea that there's no second acts in American life. He's full of shit. Like, I'm sorry, he's full of shit.
We love comeback stories. That's
well,
like,
yeah, exactly.
That's
And it's
American
just
thing.
dumb.
Yeah.
And like, why not? Like, I'm on my third act as a human being, right? So, and hopefully there'll be a fourth
Be
one.
careful. Third acts are, you don't want to be in the third act.
Well, I'm hoping there's a fourth act where I don't have to do this shit anymore, and I can go write bad science fiction and play bad jazz drums.
But I'm glad you brought even the science fiction part up, because you know the idea that we're like in a liminal space right now. Liminal space being like the time between the anxiety that comes, like you go into school in the summer. That's a liminal space, right? It's funny that the number one movie right now, whipping Star Wars ass, whipping everyone, is called Back Room, which is really about like it's the archetype of what we're going through. It's like a big surprise hit made on very small budget from a meme in 2019, and
YouTubers, not Hollywood, kicking their ass.
It's kicking their ass.
No.
We're in this liminal space, That's why we need you to start writing the shows again. We need the good stories coming out, right?
Well, I'm gonna be honest. By the way, the Mandalorian and Grogu was a fine little movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna go see it. I'm gonna see it.
It's worth your time. I've seen it twice. It's a good little movie. It's Jon Favreau, who's still as base as he ever was. I mean, dude, seriously. And it's a Star Wars movie about fathers and sons. Like, the world is healing. Like, dude, it's a Star Wars movie about fathers and sons, and about dysfunctional families. Okay, what else is new? The world is healing. So they've got work to do. Everybody, but look, the story space has been just as big a battle space for your mind as the money space, as the political space, and everything, because it's all tied together. I've been on this thing for a long time. That look, if you're evil, if I'm Emperor Palpatine, this is why I love using Star Wars references, just to remind everybody. If I'm Emperor Palpatine, and I thought about this many times, or I'm Ed Harris in the Truman Show, which is, by the way, literally a crib of Philip K. Dick's Time at a Joint, by the way, FYI. If I'm them, I am going to do everything I can to take my generation, that was galvanized by Star Wars, by Rocky, by these great stories, and told us, oh yeah, by the way, you can beat the Empire. Right? I would do everything imaginable to subvert that, destroy it, and because full well that in 2015 through 2025 we're coming into our power. Look at Trump's cabinet. Look who's coming behind him. It's all going to be Gen X. Look at what Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida. Look at the way the world is. So the way American culture is shifting. It's shifting in a Gen X direction. And what do? You want to split Gen X off, and you want to create generational division. Why is Marjorie Taylor Greene out there screaming about boomers? Because she was told to, and because she was paid to, not because she believes in anything, because that woman's too stupid for freaking words. But and so you realize that all of this is part of the operation to rob you of your reason, to rob you of your agency, and tell you don't have any choice. You just sit back, stack sats, and chuckle and Collapsitarian. I'm telling you, this is going back to all of it. This is why I was like trying to tell the Bitcoiners 3 years ago, no, dudes, the fight is here now. Bitcoin will be a part of that story. It doesn't necessarily have to be the story, and we do not have to have the big long-term conversation about how Bitcoin wins. Notice how Saifedean Ammous, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, gets onto Patrick Bet-David's show, and they spend 90 minutes talking about Israel. Dude, there's a fucking tell there.
Yeah,
because he should be there, not talking about this bullshit.
But the same, I believe one of the reasons why we entered the Trump campaign with such unity in 2024 and displayed a difference with most political worldviews, Democrat, Republican, why we were able to split so decisively, It's a very simple framework, and it comes from the 2020 stolen election. And this is where the frame that Bitcoiners have is so accessible, because don't trust, verify is a worldview for us. We didn't sit around and have to wait for stories of Tina Peters and the Kraken and what happened in Georgia and the water main breaking. Once Bitcoiners found out that you couldn't audit the election, we realized we didn't have an election. There's no such thing as an election in America.
Right.
We don't have elections.
Right.
Like,
And if you don't, and if you don't
going on, right?
And look at what's going on in California.
Well, that's why I'm bringing this
right
up.
now.
That's exactly why I'm bringing this up, because just like with the capital flows right now, just like, we saw in COVID, just like we saw with Russia, the Leviathan has to come up and breach the surface and show itself when it's threatened in these ways. You start seeing the architecture of deceit. You start seeing exactly how this beast functions. And when it breaches that surface, and you can see it, right? In the days after the election in 2020, the truth was out there, because, for a minute, for example, when the 2020 election happened and we didn't know what happened, what's going on, you got to realize for about 4 days, they were running FTX logos, because the only prediction market which existed in the world for the 2020 election was SBF's prediction market on FTX. No one in America knew what FTX was. No one had any idea what it was. It was a non-entity. I was hired by Kraken to actually monitor them and shadow them and reverse engineer their products, because they were shipping products like this. I knew already they weren't building crypto products and were trading off spreadsheets, because I was like, there's no way they can, it's just not, they're not building this. It didn't happen.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
But for a minute, I was the only person in the world who also knew that when Bill Blair went after Arthur Hayes and arrested him in the Trump administration, that we had a major problem. And then Blair turns around. The next thing he does is say, no, Joe Biden won the election. And, Bill Barr.
No, I just want to make sure that
Bill Barr. Yeah, exactly. Bill Barr. So Bill Barr goes and does this, right? And meanwhile, SBF is the largest funder of the Democrats. The market for the prediction market was only, the order book was like $1 million. It was nothing. It was lower than his donation. And the media was like, oh, the non-sentimental gamblers, they even believe Trump lost. So right away, you could see the op in these institutions. You could see how people were being persuaded. But Bitcoiners understood they didn't need to know about SBF and this and that. You couldn't prove the election. There was no auditability. That was one of the ways that we broke to Trump in such decisive numbers, because we no longer believed any of it was real. That was a big moment. California is going to be even bigger for that. We're starting to get the upgrade in America that don't trust, verify is necessary for your operating system. You require, if you're going to have a worldview and someone out there is telling you you can't audit an election, you're trying to do Ethereum transactions and call it Bitcoin. It's not going to work.
Right.
And
no, you're and that's important. It's the psychology of that. And I live by the by the adage, which is similar, which is distrust but verify. Right. Just assume they're lying and then force them to prove to you that they're not lying. Right. And they can never prove to you that they're not lying. So there
ultimately,
you go.
What comes out of all this conflict right now, because I've never bought what the Bitcoiners say about privacy. We just don't value it. We don't care. I make mistakes all the time. I don't know what I'm doing with this stuff. I just don't value it. Now, that's because of, what I value in my subconscious. And I do believe one day we're going to reprogram people to value privacy. But you got to change the money first. You got to change what we're afraid of, what we value, our value system. Then we can get to the privacy question. We can start to actually get there. But this idea that we can nag people into privacy, it's not going to work, right? It's going to work because we now have this upgrade of don't trust, verify. It's going to evolve us as people.
CoinKite has been in the game for years, creating hands down the best and most secure hardware when it comes to securing your Bitcoin. The Cold Card Q is an absolute powerhouse and my daily driver, and it's ideal for newcomers and advanced users alike. The Tap Signer gives you a low-cost, user-friendly option for those just getting started or for convenience when traveling. You can head to coinkite.com and use code BTC Sessions for discounts, or simply scan the QR code on the screen to get started right away. One company I like pointing people to when they ask about Bitcoin mining is Abundant Mines. They were founded by Bo and Christine Turner after losing over $500,000 to broken promises in the mining industry. And they built their hosting model to remove the usual headaches. With Abundant Mines, you own your machines and keep 100% of the Bitcoin you mine. There's no revenue share, no hidden skims. Pricing is simple. One flat monthly fee covers power, parts, labor, and repairs. They also guarantee uptime. If a machine goes down, their hash rate redirect system routes hash power from their fleet so earnings don't just stop. And every machine is insured at full replacement value. Everything is hosted in the US, powered by Hydro, and mining equipment may qualify for 100% year one bonus depreciation. Learn more at abundantmines.com/sessions.
Well, one of the, and Nolan has a great point about privacy. Because early on in the whole thing, remember, I sometimes you see, I'm one of those people that can see the end game really, really clearly. I can see a lot of these things happening. The first thing I went all in. I'm like, yeah, privacy coins are going to matter at some point in the future. We're going to value these things when we get, when we get to the stack, right? And so, obviously, you look at like Zcash and Monero and all these other ones, and that's fine. The point being is that what you're looking at with the new stablecoin regime that's coming into place, and this is, I think, why you have to really look at the dollar as to why the dollar is going to win in this as the I don't know, we call it whatever you want, call it the unit of account in all of this, as opposed to the store value or the medium of exchange. It's also going to be the medium of exchange, but it's going to lose its store value function, and it should, because it was never designed to do that in the first place. It was never a good idea. Is the following, which is that we're going to have the opportunity here to use the system where there is no privacy, meaning when you go out into the world and you want to run a business, right? It's like you need to have, in order to have legal protection, right, for your business, you're going to have to give up some privacy because you're a public concern. You're going to have to be able to, you have some privacy, meaning you have a private company, your share structure can be private, the ownership can be private, all that stuff. American law does this and does it really, really well. And that's part of the reason why American law, why the US dollar is going to be the medium of choice to drive us to this new system. But the stable coins are also still going to be private property, in that you will have a legal recourse if someone tries to steal them from you, right? In the fully private Bitcoin world, if your private defense is only yours. Now, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm saying that you value a certain portion of that value a certain portion of your assets that you are private about, that no one should know anything about. What's on your Trezor, what's, how many ounces of gold you've got in your toilet, yada, yada, yada. That's your private stash and your stack of dollar bills or whatever. So, but at the same time, when you want to move out into the real world, you actually have to be able to give up the privacy to get the other legal protection. And the United States still has that system. If you look at, and it's not going away, it's actually going to get strengthened in a lower leveraged regime, monetary regime, where there's more collateral, even if the collateral is T-bills, it's still a more collateralized system that's built on top of a strong foundation of individual rights, property, this, that, and everything else. And that's very important. What is the European Union looking to do? What does London want? What does that system want? They want complete and utter central bank. The central banks own the currency. You get to rent it from them, and you have no guarantee of property. They can just take it from you because you're a bad person. And they can define what a bad person is at any moment of any day, and you have no ability to have any security. If you don't have any security, you don't have any time preference. Your time preference is zero. You will engage in nothing but, remember, the less security people feel, right? This is basic Bitcoin shit. This is basic everyday Austrian economic shit. If you have less certainty over your future, you will engage in higher time preference behavior than if you have certainty about what the future is going to look like. And then you can invest in the longer term projects and have lower time preference. You're going to be willing to sock your money away into an investment for 5 years in order to get a return on it, or. One system is designed to destroy your ability to generate wealth and turn you into an ab-reacting Momo monkey on fucking Twitter. And the other one is designed to turn you into, is incentivizing you to be a builder of society and a civilization. One is anti-civilizational, one is civilizational. And it sounds like I've been harsh to Bitcoiners in this podcast. I'm not. You guys, we all have that. That's what we want. The question is the order of operations of how you get there, what systems you put in place to interface with all that, to deal with all of these fucking people that have different priorities than you, and allow them to get to the point where they get back to that thing. It's like to get back to that moment where, all they really want to do is, it's like Nathan asked me when I first popped in before he showed up, Nolan. He's like, so how are things going, out in Tennessee? How are you guys doing? Like, are you enjoying life out there? I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of enjoying life. How's, and he asked about my wife and what she's doing and everything else. Like, yeah, this is what's important. And our goal is to build shit and enjoy a more predictable future. But in order to do that, we're going to have to go through this, as you put it, Nolan, the liminal phase of the uncertainty of shifting from one system to the other. Well, and this new system's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a step in the right direction, or even 5 steps in the right direction.
That's why I agree with you about the surveillance of the US dollar, because again, when I'm talking about reprogramming our subconscious so that we value privacy one day, it's because ultimately I do think that while this whole era, like what you described about Europe, has been about the government spying on us. I think the big change that's happening here is we're going to reverse the polarity of that. What you see with all of these audits, what you see with what Besant is doing, all these things that are happening this year, Venezuela, Iran, at the end of the year, you do these compilations of the story that was the biggest, right? When they see these waves, like something by Charlie Kirk, and then, like last year, we're going to see that this year too. It'll be Venezuela, Iran will last a little longer. But every day, the third story of the day are Besant's audits. But at the end of the year, because it's going to be the third story all year, and no one's even talking about Venezuela, barely anyone talks about Iran anymore compared to what it was 2 months ago. Even Trump said it's getting kind of boring. Epstein's going to come back, but even that's going to fall. The number one story of the year at the end of the year is going to be about these audits. And what that story is really about is about, for the first time ever, we're getting transparency on them. We're going to flip the polarity here in our legal system, even like prove it, like innocent until proven guilty. That's for people. That's for me and you and everyone. That's not for the government.
No,
that's not
the government. The government should have zero right to privacy.
None. And so we're going to get that now. That's what the dollar. That's why if they want fiat to be actual government declaration money, because fiat is a government declaration. If you want to make government declarations money, okay. The final phase of that is we know everything about you. Sorry. If you want to do it that way, we get to know. Eventually, we'll value our own privacy because of what we're about to do. Spencer Pratt's about to make a TV show every day about being mayor. Do you think that's going to be valuable to people? People are going to love seeing the mayor go to work and fix a problem and talk to a person. And it's going to be drama one week and exciting and a failure and a victory. And it's going to suck everyone in. That's the future of politics. The future of politicians is what Trump already brought to the White House. It is already reality TV. It's already that way. And it has to be that way. We have to have cameras all around them. It didn't work. In the old era, Nixon thought this would work for him. He thought in Watergate, which was a coup, which was a fake scam. When Nixon was out there doing his thing, he thought he could be saved by releasing. Kennedy had rigged the whole White House to record everything they ever said and ever did, right? So Nixon said, all right, enough of this Watergate shit. I'm going to release everything and show the world that I'm innocent. Now, what we have is this great collection of Nixon just being hilarious, right? This is where we get all these, the Jews and the gays and the Roman, all these quotes you hear about Nixon over time. They're all from that release.
Right.
And people loved it. People, when it came out, loved it. But of course, the fake news ran an op on it and made it all sound so bad and all that. He wasn't in a position to control it back then. And the coup that he failed to survive is the same coup they tried on Trump. But Trump is able to reverse the polarity here in a way that we've never seen before. That's why D-Class, all this stuff is going to continue all summer as well. We've got to basically reanimate the American mind with the truth about what happened, which is reversing this polarity on transparency and looking into the governments.
I want to jump in for just a second, though, quick, Dom, if I may. So, one, wrapping all this together, I do like that. Like, we had Besant talking recently about like $500 billion in fraud within the budget. We also had him talking about the SBR. You've got MasterCard and Visa talking about stablecoin rails as well. But I wanted to pause on that for a second because I needed to come back to something mentioned earlier and get your take on it, which was the acting director Bill Pulte.
Yeah. You're anticipating exactly what I was about to say.
Go for it.
Like, and that's why Bill Pulte was putting. It was funny the other day. We saw the announcement, and literally I sent that announcement to everyone, right? And the universal response is, "What in the actual fuck?" Right? Everybody, literally, what the fuck? That's weird. What the fuck? I said it. Oh my god! What does this mean? And I thought about it for a second. The first thing I landed on, because it was Tuesday morning, and I had to do my podcast for Newsmax, and I literally saw it at 9:30, and I'm recording at 9:45. I'm like, what do I say about this? Right? I never do that, but I had to, and I said, okay. What sounds to me is that Trump needed to put somebody he knows is loyal in as ODNI. It doesn't matter whether he's got anything else. That's how bad things are, because we're looking at a full intelligence service revolt, and that's been clear for the last couple of months, or certainly the last 6 or 7 weeks. And with the fake stories about the CIA raiding Gabbard's office in Washington and all this stuff, this shit's been insane, right? Okay. But that's not the real story, right? The real story, when I had 24 hours to really think about it, some other people like put some thoughts on the table, and I read them on Twitter, and I thought about it, and I'm like, oh no, this is about the guy who is a forensic accountant. Bill Pulte is a forensic accountant by trade. So he's been I'm gonna throw a story out. This is the story. So what does Trump do? What's Trump? Trump is the lightning rod. He says something every day. Every day is opposite day in Trump's new America, right? He says X, the Democrats have, and the intelligence services have to say not X. Not Y, but not X. So they're the easiest people in the world to manipulate. So he's been in complete control for the most part of the weekly news cycle.
The
so
cat
Thursday
laser thing. The cat
yeah,
laser.
that's Trump. And Trump goes out there and he does all this while ticking away in the background. You've got Russ Vogt over at OMB fixing the way we actually spend money and the granting system and all that stuff. And you've got Pulte over at FHA. What's he doing? He's going through for the last 18 months, he's been doing nothing but going through all of the mortgage data, like who got what, this, that, everything else. So, and Pulte, in the early days of the administration, kept running his mouth about the Fannie and Freddie relist, and eventually the administration basically told him to shut the fuck up, because like, dude, we're gonna get there. You need to go back to work and stop being a lightning rod. I know you're enthusiastic. I know you want to fix the country. Shut up and go do your job. And your job is to uncover just how corrupt these people are. If I'm going to throw something out at you, and I was chatting with literally like 10 minutes before we went on, I was chatting with Dexter White. He called, and I said, "Oh, by the way, there's a CIA angle on this, in that the money has been flowing through the mortgage fraud, and you're going to tell me that the CIA they aren't masters at creating LLCs to obfuscate what it is that they're doing and moving money around and everything else, and buying houses on FHA loans for their LLC carve-outs to move tax money through and to fund all these operations." I'm like, that's what's going on. And that was Wednesday. I'm like thinking about this. Oh, okay, so that's probably why they moved Pulte in there. And then by Wednesday afternoon, so by Wednesday, that was Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday morning, John Thune is out there, and they're all screaming how they got to get rid of Pulte, right? how he can't become ODNI, how he's not qualified, he's not this, he's not that. They're going to fight him harder than they fought Gabbard, right? That's your tell. They know he knows. But because all of this money has been, there's all of the intelligence committees in the Senate and House intelligence committees, all these CIA assets that we call Senator Schiff and, Rep this and, Senator Kelly and Rep Slotkin and all these people are all just freaking intelligence assets. Okay. And they're all probably as guilty as fuck using FHA and using Fannie and using the privacy of Fannie, the conservatorship of Fannie and Freddie to black box it as Fannie and Freddie. And here's the thing. I've been saying this for 2 years now. City of London has done everything imaginable. And I use City of London as a metaphor for the globalists. Call them Davos, the high table, I don't give a fuck. City of London. And I'm going to keep saying City of London until you get through your fucking heads that it's City of London. Now,
the place that
they have been fighting.
The thing that has no sovereign, no king, no government.
Right. Nothing. Right. So they have been fighting Trump relisting and IPOing Fannie and Freddie. They have done everything imaginable to stop this from happening. They shut down the government for a month in November because Trump wanted to IPO them back in November. Why? If you go back and you really look at the timeline of 2008, you realize the goal of the 2008 financial crisis was to install Obama, steal Fannie and Freddie from the shareholders, put it in a black box, and then blame it all on Lehman Brothers. And then they bail out AIG, they leave Lehman Brothers hang, and they steal Fannie and Freddie. And that's the order of the timeline. Fannie and Freddie go first, then AIG gets their first bailout, then Lehman Brothers is not bailed out, and then Paulson comes in and bails out AIG again. Why does AIG matter? Because AIG is literally fucking London got bailed out and Lehman Brothers got crushed.
And
and we lost the whole thing, and then the 10 Downing Street candidate, not the Manchurian candidate, the 10 Downing Street candidate becomes president as John McCain effectively stands aside.
Yeah.
Abdicates.
Sarah Palin gets treated as a psycho mental case because she's the only one complaining about it and doesn't really know what's going on. Right?
Of course, she doesn't know what's going on. She's Sarah Palin, and I don't say that.
But she's not. She wasn't equipped to be
right. She wasn't. She has no idea what's going on. She's a governor of Alaska.
But she knew something was up, right?
Right. She knew something was wrong, and so when you start to really, and why would they care about this so much? Again, go back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast. The goal here was to get the Fed down to the zero bound, and we lose. So a couple of basic things here, folks. The Fed funds rate controls the short end of the U.S. Yield curve. It controls the T-bill market by buying and selling and doing open market operations to control the T-bill market. That is how they enforce the Fed funds rate. The long end of the yield curve is controlled by the mortgage industry. And
it used to be LIBOR, but that got changed in that 08 time.
But again, but it's more important. Understand that Fannie and Freddie, by buying and selling and making a market in mortgage-backed securities, were able to control the long end of the yield curve. So London, after 2008, had full control of both ends of our yield curve. We were completely betrayed. What changed that? SOFR. SOFR changes that by putting the short end of the yield curve back under the control of American money markets and American demand for money without needing the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, in fact, takes its cues from SOFR now as opposed to the other way around. But they're fighting the long end of the yield curve because where do foreign central banks park most of their, when they buy treasuries, they don't buy, especially the Bank of England, especially the Caymans, especially Canada. You can see it all the time. They're constantly attacking the 10 and the 30. And because those are thinner, well, the 10 isn't a thin market, but the 30 is. And after a while, it became really obvious to me that whenever they really wanted to make write a headline about the health of the American bond markets and the American economy, they would bomb the 30-year yield. Okay. And they'd buy 30s or they'd sell 30s and buy 2s, flatten the yield curve, create a kink, play these freaking games. You can see it in the ticker report since Mark Carney took over Canada. Okay. You can see it. It's everywhere. And, and you can see it in the bond spreads. You can see it in all this shit. And I'm like, I've been watching it going, oh, watch, they're going to move the 30. Okay. So we're going to move the 30-year today. And then we're going to get the Financial Times, investing.com, Bloomberg, all of them to write all these stupid fucking articles about how the United States can't solve its debt problem. Then we'll send our useful idiots out in the financial press who are outsiders in the financial press, and we'll have them, and we'll give them an expanded audience. We'll put Luke Gromen on Tucker Carlson,
and that's why I've been saying, I've been saying from basically, from when I became a Bitcoiner and started to realize we were in the middle of a third world war. And that World War III is economic and psychological. And these are the two. There might be some hot war things like the Ukrainians are experiencing and the Iranians are experiencing, but it's not the nature of this war. The nature of this war, and when we peel back the layers of sediment, we will go back to the 2008 financial crisis. We will see that from that day on, we were engaged in World War III. It was economic. If you don't understand the economic flows, and if you don't understand that those economic flows are actually all about aligning the messaging and the narrative and all of that stuff, which is why when I saw Bill Pulte, to bring it back to Bill Pulte, I was excited. Bill Pulte has been giving away Bitcoin for charity, just for fun things, for almost 10 years now. He became the Bitcoin faucet. Yeah. He became
I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. Bill Pulte. So when I saw him, I said, the standard now is that only people I've booked as Bitcoin conference speakers get to be DNI, because I had Tulsi Gabbard way before she was. And then Bill Pulte came and he was there. Yeah, Bill Pulte. I mean, it wasn't always Bitcoin, but what he would do is regularly, because he's born rich too, don't forget, right? He's not just rich. His dad built every home in Ohio and all this. He inherited a tremendous real estate fortune personally. And so while he has his own skills, he's very open about being born rich and gave away money. He would always do a thing before he was in cabinet. The reason I booked him as a speaker, he wasn't in the Trump administration when I booked him. I booked him as a speaker because he would every day put up a thing, anyone who has a sad story, anyone who needs a car, I want to buy a car today. And so people would write, my kid and this and that. And he just give you right in the DMs. And he was using Bitcoin all the time because he didn't have to think about it after. He'd just send you Bitcoin and say, have fun, right? He didn't have to get the banking and this and that. Right. Sometimes he explicitly gave away Bitcoin. Now, I don't know about, we're 2026, so maybe 2017, maybe 9 years he started doing the Bitcoin giveaways. I don't know if I didn't know about him in 2016, but I learned about him in 2017. He's a big Scott Adams was a big fan of his, and I was a regular Scott Adams reader. So I became a Bill Pulte guy and delighted to find out he was a Bitcoiner in the early days. That's why I was so enthusiastic about him. So now you've got a Bitcoiner, and we're talking about optimism, because it is a psychological war. Well, looking at all these demoralization campaigns, I call him, Professor Zhang. I call him Fui Egwo guy. Right? Get your Fui Egwos today. I got where are the servers? We got Fui Egwos on sale today. Because Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, all of them. This is why Bitcoin is valuable in this environment. It can actually help you through the fog of war that we're all in. I saw Bill Pulte, Bitcoiner, running a Bitcoin faucet. You're in national security. I don't care what they say about you. I'm on your side. I don't give a shit. They can say whatever they want.
I knew that. I knew that about Pulte as well. And I'm like, the guy's just, he's just a decent guy, and that's it. And again, would he be the perfect guy for ODNI if he's a guy who has no political? He's got enough money that he doesn't need politics. It's the same argument.
Money's not.
He doesn't need money. Like same thing with Besson. Doesn't need money. He's there to do a job. And and he's not there to feather his nest. He's therefore, and that's why they hate them, right? That's why they're hated so thoroughly, because they can't be controlled with hookers below money or
he's a real power. Family guy. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know him from anyone else, right? But I've followed him.
Right.
So far, so good. Doesn't look corruptible in the honeypot blackmailocracy that we live in. He's resistant to that, just as Trump was, just as Besant is. I mean, what are they going to say about Besant? That you know what I mean? Like, sure, he's had a good time in his life.
Dude lives in a pink fucking mansion, and he's so cool.
I'm not gay. Don't just because I love him, don't start accusing me. Guys. I'm allowed to love Scott Besant. Right? As much as I love him.
He's unbelievably entertaining. All right, so
He
then,
really
gentlemen, just so we have something to leave the audience with for both of you, Tom, what should people be on the lookout in just the medium term here? What's kind of your view moving forward that you know that they're proceeding with the plan as planned?
We have a dollar liquidity crisis that's brewing, like, and
Okay.
it's right here, right now. And Bitcoin's on sale, gold's on sale, silver's on sale, oil's not quite on sale yet. As a matter of
It's
fact, I
under
think
100,
oil's
yeah.
probably, I think oil's going to probably relax back into the high 70s, low 80s. I think that's where it needs to be. You've created a more complicated flow pattern, right? In terms of shipping and getting oil to market, and it's going to take years to develop Alaska into 2 million barrels a day or whatever they're going to. It's going to take time. So, but that's fine. Like, Trump has gotten the pledges from Takaishi in Japan, Xi in China, and others. He's telling people, stop talking about Taiwan, stop talking about we're fixing all of this stuff. And what people should really be looking at is Trump's strategy is to do away with all of these artificial choke points that are that's where someone can set up a toll booth, set up a narrative, create a conflict, and start a war. And war does not have to be troops moving, war, as Nolan put it. It's war, and financial war is just war by other means. Politics is just war by other means. So watch it from that perspective through the summer. And I think as we get into the fall, Trump is setting up a convention in September, not a rally, a convention. Now you ask yourself, what's the difference? The difference is delegates to a convention. So what are we talking about? I think in the next 30 to 60, again, everybody's playing an extended pretend game. So trying to, what are they trying to do in Davos? They're trying to wait Trump out. That's all they can do, right? The French are trying
Canada,
to push.
That a big
the French are trying to restart the Russia-Ukraine war by attacking St. Petersburg through NATO territory. It's clear they are not going to stop. Okay, it's this is not an easy. They're not going to go gently here. It's going to be difficult. Thankfully, Putin still has political power, still has enough temperance, understands. I think he and Trump and Xi all have a plan, and it's going to be very, very difficult to navigate it. But if you assume that these men are all on the same path, which is destroy the globalists from Europe, and then we'll work out our differences amongst ourselves after that's over. That's going to be the story. Hell, that's going to be the story for the next 4 to 6 years. And in the meantime, we're going to have to suffer through all of these stupid libertarian psyops about Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, and all this other bullshit. None of it matters. It's just stuff to play with on Twitter.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm at the same vein. I think you're going to see Trump pivot in 2 ways. I don't even know if it's a pivot. It's just a continuation. You're going to see him continue with the kayfabe. He's got to keep getting people. You're going to see more Epstein stuff, because if Trump isn't the target of Epstein, nobody cares. So you're going to see him, take the energy of that again. He's going to start absorbing, frameworks around that. I think we're going to get a summer of declassification and 9/11 stuff. I think that's where that tranche was kept out for a reason. I think it's going to come back because you can't shove all, it's too much, right? It's just too much. People have been too brainwashed on the 3-act play, on all of these frameworks. So you're going to continue to see that. And then again, the arguments aren't going to be made rhetorically. They're going to be made physically. And Trump is going to move to this golden age type framework. And he's going to pick up where the golden age ended last time, which is declass all the way back to JFK and the JFK plan. And I think this is an off sort of script, not a common prediction. But I think you're going to see Trump and Putin announce, like you already heard Trump's route for peace or whatever he's calling it now. He's always got to brand it Trump. So it's basically a physical Silk Road again. The pipelines that you heard Tom refer to, going through Israel and binding up the Abraham Accords areas. But more importantly, instead of a choke point, you're going to have a physical bridge and a physical connection from Alaska to Russia, or a plan at least. They're not going to actually build it. But you're going to see
that's absolutely on the table. Absolutely.
And more importantly, you're going to hear Trump say something like, we're so busy making money with the oil. We have so much oil. We have so much energy. We're building nuclear. We're so busy in Venezuela. And the Russians are already good at it. And they used to own Alaska. Didn't you know that? We're going to let them come and extract the oil and create a market for it and come and use their expertise and sell it to the Chinese. So you're going to get a deal, weirdly, and this is exactly what Trump said, that the route was going to go from the Middle East to America. He's already telegraphing it. The route is going to go to America from the Middle East. You're going to be able to RV in Siberia, okay?
It's going to be fun. And then and the last piece of that puzzle is Japan, because Japan is the major energy importer and the pivot point.
And they're going to get their
breaks, and they're going to, and you break. And remember, the normalization of monetary policy in Japan is a story that I've been on since the day Kuroda said he was stepping down, or he started widening the band on yield curve control for the 10-year. So this is like 4 years in the making. That is the big story, because at some point Takaishi is going to be able to sit down with Putin and finally draft an end to World War II, so that Japan and Russia can now finally, do investment deals with each other. The Russians have been building out their eastern flow of oil to Kamchatka. I've talked about this before. I don't know that there's any plans on the books for a further expansion of the Espo pipeline, but it's currently up to 1.67 million barrels a day. There's more gas out there to, the Sakhalin 1 and 2. All of this stuff is out there, and Japan wants it all. And the Chinese need it, and India can get their oil and gas. And this is how he's going to split oil off in the City of London, is going to move that oil and gas flow away from the Middle East, and India is not going to be dependent upon that. He's going to effectively open it up and go, look, you can buy it from the Far East. And and that changes everything. And so we're going to move into that world of ARC, what I've been saying for 2 years now, which is America, Russia, China, as a geostrategic reality. And we're going to leave, and we're just going to let the Europeans wall themselves off into their own John Carpenter. We're not going to have to wall off Europe and make it into a John Carpenter movie. Europe is doing it to themselves.
And by the way, we got Zack Snyder remaking. He's doing it.
They've been talking about wanting to remake Escape to New York for 30 years, right? Finally, I think we have the right. I'm like, he's the only guy I would ever.
We got the right team to do it.
And even going back to what you were saying about Japan and it being the linchpin in all of this, ultimately that's why Satoshi Nakamoto chose a Japanese pseudonym to release Bitcoin, but for real, it's not a joke. Japan sits at this. If he didn't release it, right, the globalists would have had their way, in that what happened in 2008 was China was supposed to take the baton, and they were supposed to become the new reserve currency and replace America. Now, this was all stuff we found out about the plan, if you will, when the Soviet Union fell. The Russians who came out of the Soviet Union knew all about China replacing America, because this was all in their propaganda. It was all in their declassification. That was the plan. And so when they made that choice for Japan, when Japan made that choice, when Satoshi Nakamoto made the choice to have the Japanese pseudonym, it's because the truth was that was baked in. And Bitcoin being released meant there was the new option, which is no country gets it. No one gets it. It's a separation of money and state, and we go into a new framework. And that's what's coming.
I love it. Gentlemen, Tom, where can everybody go to follow you?
As always, you can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. The worst version of me will show up nearly every day. And then, of course, Patreon/Gold Guns, where you can, you can sign up for the newsletter and, support the work that we do, because that's how we make our bonds. So
100%. Nolan, where everybody can find your fun links.
You can find me at CountBTC on X, and I am regularly in the mornings between 9 and 11 a.m. Eastern time on Roxham TV. We do the Great Awakening morning show, where we look at all the psyops and look at what's going on, and we try to follow the money more interestingly than the fake news does.
The world is heading down a dark path. Online censorship, central bank digital currencies, a complete loss of privacy, and it's only accelerating. Most people are falling behind with the latest technology, and those that aren't are sacrificing their data, their control, and their dignity just to keep up. That doesn't have to be you. Here, you'll have everything you need to break free. Over the past decade, I've helped 20 million people take control of their money, their data, and their digital lives. Now, I'm bringing everything I've learned to one place. Sovereign Sessions is your home to learn, master, and live freedom tech. Bitcoin, AI, private communications, self-hosted tools, everything. Each week, I'll walk you through step by step with the most critical tools that put you back in charge. Don't ask permission, take control. Welcome to the Sovereign Sessions.